Let's talk a little bit of Florida football because Tennessee's next significant game will be against the University of Florida because I think they've got Austin Peay under control. But let's get to it right now. It's What the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
What the H? Today brought to you by Andy Mason, andymasonrealestate.com. So the University of Florida starts the season at a whopping 0-1, and it was a 24-11 loss to Utah that really didn't even feel that close. And it was like they were out physical even in the first quarter against Utah. And I'm not selling Utah short. I liked Utah all of last season. I love what they've done out there. They play a physical style of football that you don't think of when you think of West Coast football. So I do not think this is a bad loss. But the way it looked that they got out physical, and this is year number 2, is it too soon? Am I overreacting to say that Florida needs to think about Billy Napier's replacement? Is that too soon?
Yeah, it's too soon because it's going to hire an UAD before it hires the next football coach.
Okay, give me a little bit of background on that. And I know it, but for our listeners, they basically hired a sports information director as their athletic director.
And there's nothing wrong with sports information directors. Scott, personal biases. Scott Strickland.
When's the last time you've been a beat reporter, boots on the ground, face to face, nose to nose with those cats? Go ahead. Not that my therapist has to hear about that.
I didn't realize beat reporters were so courageous. Make them sound like Navy SEAL members. I would go. He hired Dan Mullen, and there's nothing wrong with that hire. It just didn't work out because of his recruiting. But and then he hired Billy Napier. You can't go from. I think he went from a decent hire to a really questionable hire. And does anybody think Billy Napier will have the success that Dan Mullen did? He did have success before everything just fell off the bat because of his recruiting. But in terms of managing the team, I mean, he got Florida in the SEC championship game. I don't see that happening with Billy Napier. But I think you can't. I don't think you start doing that now. He's got a $39 million buyout. But there's a lot of, to me, contradictory stuff going on with him. He's supposed to, as you said earlier, supposed to be a detail guy, but then he also wants to be the head coach, the offensive coordinator, call plays, and also be the quarterback's coach. Well, he's
and detail oriented, John. They ran 2 number 3s out on the field at the same time. I've never seen that happen.
I know what happened on that. He said, "Get number 33 out there." And so those 2 guys ran out together, 3 and 3, and it was just a communications breakdown.
They were standing together.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
That's the guy I want, 33.
You 2 are not allowed to stand together on the sidelines anymore. Caleb, I'm going to throw something at you right now, and I'm going to disagree with John. It may be a new athletic director or whatever, but let's face it, there's always boosters that have the power. I'm already thinking Lane Kiffin after this season. Period. End of discussion. Lane Kiffin would win at a high level at the University of Florida. And I can tell you from a very, very, very good source, he wants the heck out of Ole Miss.
Well, he also, Lane Kiffin is the type of person who would much rather live in Florida than live in Ole Miss.
Right. That's exactly right.
And
I texted Lane at one point. I said, "How's your signing day going?" And he was on a boat. And he goes, "My signing day consists of fishing for tarpon." And he shot me a video of that. That was at FAU. So, yeah, he would move in a heartbeat. He lobbied for the LSU job before his friend Ed Orgeron was even fired. And yeah, I know he wanted the Auburn job, didn't get it. It would be bad news for Tennessee, but if I'm Florida, I'm Billy Napier has already run its course in a little more than a season. Caleb, I would make that move in a heartbeat. Would you?
Yes. I want to say the only thing I won't overreact to is that this has nothing to do with how I feel about Billy Napier as a coach. And I don't overreact to last weekend with Miami and Florida State both winning. Miami and Florida State, because of this new move, I think they're still stuck in the ACC for a long time. And so their revenue is going to be significantly less than Florida's for the foreseeable future. I think just because of that alone, Florida's going to get to a point where they can just so easily recruit the state better than the other two schools, where they can get all the talent to specifically go to Florida, that I think it's going to be I'm not to talk about it, kind of a Tennessee situation with Fulmer in the 90s, where Tennessee could have their litter of Georgia or Alabama kids because those programs were down at the time. And I think that it'll be a point where like Florida's success may be immune to the head coach, whoever the head coach is, because it's going to be so easy to get talent in Florida.
John, let me ask you this, because I thought that Urban Meyer would be and was, except for raising murderers throughout his program and felons. Other than that, he had a lot of success at the University of Florida. I thought that was a really good hire. I actually thought that Dan Mullen would have been a good hire. I thought the MO at the University of Florida would be a Steve Spurrier type. Now, what does that mean? I don't mean they're that innovative as a coach. It means an offensive guy and let the defense fall in place, because you should naturally have enough talent in the area. Is that still the MO? Because if so, Lane Kiffin fits that to a T. Plus, he's a pretty tireless recruiter as well.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin definitely fits. Billy Napier didn't fit. You go back and you look, Florida made a great hire in Steve Spurrier. It made a great hire in Urban Meyer. And it made a good hire in Dan Mullen. But Dan Mullen's got to take the heat for what happened and his failed recruiting. But if I'm AD and I hire Dan Mullen and I know Dan Mullen's personality, it's pretty quirky, and I would worry about him on the recruiting trail. So I want to beef up that support staff in terms of recruiting all over the place, because Dan Mullen can coach, and he can certainly coach offense. You saw what he did at Mississippi State. So, but Florida's had a lot of bad hires. It hired Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Ron Zook. I mean, seriously.
These are some names.
No, I know. And Florida has, I talk about South Florida, Dade County. Florida has as much pull there as Miami does. Florida State has as much pull there as Miami does. So to not be able to recruit is really difficult. You've almost got to go into a staff meeting and say, boys, let's figure out how not to recruit today. It's pretty difficult. Are we looking at an SEC East, John, let me begin with you and go to Caleb, that is just absolutely ripe for the picking? Because when Tennessee won a national championship in 1998, when they had great success winning 2 SEC championships, we're talking about partly drunken Ray Goff, who was at Georgia, and then Jim Donnan. We're talking about Brad Scott at South Carolina, or Steve Spurrier was at Florida. That was a legend that Tennessee was able to overcome in 98. But other than that, the East and the coaches, I've talked to a coach about that back then, were not incredibly hard to overcome from an X's and O's standpoint. How ripe is the East for Tennessee right now?
Well, you still got to get by Georgia. I mean,
but Georgia would be like the Florida back then. Yes, you win that one game. No, that's a big if. You win that one game, and then the rest of them should be pretty easy.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, that's a good point. It's fairly similar, I would think. Of course, back then, the West was down too. So that made it even easier for Tennessee to find a path to the national championship. LSU was hiring Curly Hallman. I mean, seriously. So I think once past Georgia, Tennessee's got a real nice shot in the East, but it's all going away. I mean, it would really be to Tennessee's benefit if things stayed the way they were, if they just told Texas and Oklahoma to go back to the Big 12 or Big 22 or whatever you want to call it, we'll just keep what we've got and keep those divisions, because Tennessee would have a really good shot in that situation in terms of the East. It's like solid number 2. And I thought that going into the season, but I think it even more after watching some games this Saturday.
Yeah, Caleb, I think that Tennessee fans used to pray that its own program would hire a good coach. Nowadays, you pray that the other coaches in the SEC East get extensions.
Yes, exactly. Tennessee fans should be rooting like heck for Billy Napier to stay at Florida. I mean, that's their dream.
Do you see what he did there? John,
What?
Did you see that? Rooting like heck? Yeah.
Work like heck. Well, it's funny because I look back at when Tennessee first started to fall off as a program. It was the day Georgia hired Mark Richt. I mean, Tennessee's last top 10 finish before last year was 2001, which was Mark Richt's first year. And then recruiting, and I know Fulmer was a tireless recruiter, but he just couldn't get the talent out of Georgia like he was able to in the 90s because Mark Richt was there. And then when you had Steve Spurrier go to South Carolina, you had Urban Meyer at Florida, you had Nick Saban eventually at Alabama. It was just every single base dried up from where Tennessee tries to recruit from. And John, Dave knows this. I'm not buying into this whole Nashville's growing, so talent's going to come to Tennessee in state-wise argument, because Nashville's been growing for 10 years and it hasn't borne out in the recruits that come out of Nashville. They haven't really churned out a lot of NFL talent relative to their population.
So you think it's growing in the wrong way? It's not like Louisiana, where they have such a per capita, such a high number of future NFL players. So you just think the wrong kind of people are coming to Nashville. Yeah, I got you. I can buy into that. Yeah.
He's
it's
actually
a bunch of nerdy Northeasterners who are moving, who have no bodies whatsoever, and their kids are going to be physically able to play football.
And stoners from California.
Exactly.
Wait, are you telling me there's never been stoners to go to a football practice and participate?
Ooh,
not the California hippie stoners. No.
Yeah, I remember asking a guy, a player one time. I'm not going to say which school. I said, "What percentage of players do you think regularly go to practice stone?" And I was thinking he'd say, what, 20, 25%? He said, probably about 75%.
Yeah, but he was probably stoned when he gave that answer. So how credible is it?
That's probably true. Which fan base would you rather be right now? Would you rather be South Carolina or Florida, as we talk a little bit about the East? Because I think Shane Beamer is going to bust his rear and recruit. And this sounds insane, but if somebody takes over for him one day, as opposed to Florida, South Carolina might actually have better talent than if they make a transition from Billy Napier to somebody else. John, is that insane?
Sorry, but I watched all of North Carolina, South Carolina game, and I know Shane Beamer's recruiting okay, but Billy Napier has the number 3 ranked class the last time I looked for 24. So I think whoever follows him is going to have a lot to work with. So I would South Carolina is too checkered of a past to make me think the glory days are ahead, no matter who the coach is, unless it's Steve Spurrier.
No, fair. Anthony Richardson last year extended some plays. I don't think any of us thought he was great, but now he's landed a starting job in the NFL, was picked high in the draft. Did we sell Anthony Richardson short at all last year, guys?
I don't think we sold him short. I mean, I thought he was a great athlete, but I also think he's extremely injury prone, but he's a great athlete. May turn out to be a great quarterback, but I don't think he'll stay healthy in the NFL.
What about you, Caleb? Thoughts?
I didn't believe in Anthony Richardson having watched him last year, but I do pay attention to intangibles. And from everything with Anthony Richardson, it was screaming Jamarcus Russell to me for the longest time. But I got to be honest, he seems like a much harder. Everything I've heard about him at Florida and in the NFL, his intangibles are there. I don't know if the accuracy will come, but he is a really, really hard worker, and he's got the arm. So if he can, those two things, maybe you can get the accuracy with you. But yeah, it was unfair. It was unfair for me to compare him to like a big arm like Jamarcus Russell, Ryan Leaf type, who I just felt who did not have the intangibles.
What was that with Jamarcus Russell? Didn't he have something going with cough syrup, or I'm thinking somebody else?
Oh no, you're right. It was. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Scissor, yeah, sipping on some scissor.
Okay.
It's a great.
Did you ever try getting a buzz off the scissor, John, back in the day, or did they just give you all straight heroin?
No, Dave, I was never into the drug scene.
Yeah, I need help loading my musket. Well, try this try this heroin. That should help.
Then you don't care if you can't load your musket.